Hello, everyone. My name is Mrs. Tantio, and I'm the founder of Autism Career Pathways. That's the nonprofit sponsoring and supporting this new exciting project, Autistically Wired, where we create video interview series created by all kinds of autistic adults, actually autistic people of all ages, to so that we can show the world how having an autistic mind is a beautiful thing, and we actually work, we have relationships, we have collections, we have important stuff that the world would be missing out when they don't know or they think that autistic people are not good people and they should be excluded in our society. So, this project will show you the beautiful things that autistic people do and how we thrive and how we work and contribute to society. So, my guest tonight is Matt Lowry, a longtime friend. We've known each other for about 5 years now.
Yeah, it's been a bit.
I consider Matt my sidekick in the advocacy world, and Matt is such a good role model for aspiring psychologists and therapists and educators. We've co-presented together, and I will let Matt introduce himself. Go ahead, Matt.
Oh, hi. I'm Matt Lowry. I'm a licensed psychological practitioner. I work in Kentucky. I live in Indiana, and I am the last remaining person in Kentucky who is both autistic and does autism evaluations because everybody else burned out like a firework. So, I do autism evaluations. I do ADHD evaluations. I do autistic centered therapy with people, and I have an autistic son. Up until recently, I was on the Kentucky Autism Council. Uh, the long story on that one. And I work to make the world a better place for autistic people.
So, Matt, let's talk about your autistic identity uh, because you were also diagnosed late. So, did you decide
Oh,
to become a psychologist first, or did you? What's the chicken and the egg? What happened at the beginning?
okay, so buckle up. This is going to be an interesting one. So I was a weird kid, and when I was in first grade, my teacher said, "Hey, I'd like to give him a test." And I don't recall this, but apparently we were testing after school, and I was afraid that the school would be locked and I would be trapped. So I ran out of the school screaming, and they never finished the test. And then I had the same teacher again for third grade. She went from first to third, and she said, "Hey, let's give it a try during school hours." I did this test, and then right after the test, I was put into the gifted and talented program, and a psychologist started following me around and offering me money to do tests. And I didn't know what the tests were. I just knew that I got Ghostbusters money. As you will see in my collection on the wall, I've got to buy Ghostbusters. But it turns out years later, I was when I was 14, I did a research project at UK, the University of Kentucky, studying desynchronization of gonadotropins and how they affect the ester cycle. And one of the grad students was like, "Did you know you have Asperger's?" And I said, "Oh, what's that?" And it turns out that the guy who ran the autism lab was the guy who followed me around for all those years and did all the tests and all that other stuff. So that's how I found out that I was autistic. And I worked with autistic kids, and I dived into psychology because I wanted to understand more. And yeah, I worked with autistic kids for years. I stayed in the closet for as far as being autistic because I knew that, the world is a tough place, especially when there's a lot of interesting biases from non-autistic people in this field. And then I tried coming out when I was in community mental health. It did not go well, so I went right back in the closet. And then when my son was born, it was immediately obvious that he was also autistic. So I came out and had to deal with a lot of interesting discrimination uh, about it, but I built my practice around being an autistic person who understands this sort of stuff, and uh, started helping my son, and we this is the life that I lead today. So it took a while to get here, but I'm glad it did.
Thank you for sharing the beginning of your journey. So when you do assessment for autistic people, you use uh, an affirming lens. Can you talk about the difference of diagnosing a neurodivergent person through an affirming lens versus how we learn it at a university
Oh man, yeah.
as a student and what we were trained and grilled on, this is how you diagnose a neurodivergent person. So tell us the difference.
So there's a big difference between an autism affirming evaluation and a neurotypical led autism evaluation, because neurotypicals tend to see everything as a disorder of not being neurotypical, and they tend to look at everything as something to be fixed to make people act more neurotypical. And there's a lot of bias and ableism involved in all that. And when I was trained to do testing, number one, one of the favorite tests that I learned about was the PAI, and I was like, oh, hey, mine is very different from your all's. And like, I didn't realize what that meant until much more study on all that kind of stuff. And when it came to the ADOS, the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule Second Edition, uh, when I was doing the training, I thought it was hilarious because they would ask people to mimic washing their hands, mimic brushing their teeth, play with Batman action figures, and do all these things that I thought was very, very interesting, and to try to get down to why they are asking such things in a psychological sense. And everyone around me was very irritated that I kept laughing out loud at it because I was supposed to be taking this very serious test very seriously. And I think that when doing an evaluation, most people, and my son was subjected to this because my ex is not autistic. I am. She wanted a neurotypical person to do the evaluation instead of one of my friends. And he went through the test and kept marking how strange my son is from his perspective. And my son wanted to talk about the Eiffel Tower and electric towers and bridges. The evaluator wanted to talk about his own grandmother. And the evaluator was a little put off that my son didn't want to talk about the evaluator's grandmother, but instead tried to educate him about the Eiffel Tower. And I love a good info dump. And when people are comfortable in being themselves, we have a vibe. And if it's not autism, if it's not autism, I we can do testing to figure out what it is. But if it is autism, we tend to click pretty easily and talk about all sorts of stuff, because most neurotypicals don't know about interoceptive difficulties, don't know about proprioceptive difficulties, the way we communicate, our relationship hurdles. All of these things are innate to us that we get, but we may not know that there are words for, like process complexity. The issue of finding a new place for everything in order to put it away, which is why I'm still unpacking a year and a half after I moved. I haven't found the perfect place to put everything. But neurotypical people just say, "Oh, that's weird." And like today, I learned that neurotypical people tend to think in sentence fragments or vague ideas rather than complete sentences. And I think in complete sentences. And everybody in our Autistic Connections group says, "That's insane. Why would anyone not think in complete sentences?" And it's a fascinating look at this. And from doing it from a neurodivergent affirming lens, from an autism affirming lens, it's the ability to say, welcome to our people. You've come home. And you're not a weird duck You are a swan. Come with us. And people get to find out that they're not alone in the world and that there's words for all of these things and that we have culture and there are lots of autistic people in the world that have made the world a better place instead of just you mimic brushing your teeth weird. And in fact, one of the questions on the ADOS asks the evaluator to rank their discomfort with the client because they believe that, well, because neurotypical people have an innate discomfort when interacting with us because we work on a different operating system. And because I'm autistic, I pick up on the autistic OS and we vibe pretty instantly, and I get to make new pseudo friends. Can't be real friends because I'm a professional and they're a client, but at least I get to welcome them into the community.
Yes. So you just basically describe the autistic culture. What you
Ah,
just,
yes.
right? You just talk, we actually did a co-presented on this topic, autistic culture, and what is it exactly, autistic culture, autistic communication, just the autistic way of thinking, and that we are bottom up processor and
We are.
right.
Eh,
So go ahead.
oh, yeah. Oh, and so the bottom up processing is like the main thing about being autistic. It's the way that our brains are hyperplastic and hyperconnected. We don't weed out neurons and synapses like neurotypical people do. So our brains are hardwired for data absorption, and we absorb 24/7, and therefore it's hard for us to get to sleep. It's hard for us to get started on a task. It's hard for us to change tasks. It's hard for us to adjust between phases of life because we have to gather all of the data. Again, with my basement, there are so many things to put in so many places, and then I have to figure out what the perfect place for everything is, and then put the things in the place. It takes a lot. And that's the reason why our lives are often more complex and we get overloaded with so many variables and so much data, leading to autistic anxiety, which is different from allistic anxiety, and autistic depression, which is different from allistic depression. And we are often extremely exhausted from processing so much information. And that being able to identify those sort of things, neurotypical people don't see that. They see the lack of eye contact and that we talk different, but they don't understand the underlying neurology behind it, which is why a lot of people go towards behaviorism because they believe that saying, hey, stop doing that will cause us to be different somehow, instead of understanding that we work with way more information.
Yes. So that actually leads to my next question about therapy mismatch.
Ah,
You've spoken about the mismatch between autistic neurology and traditional therapy models. What are some common therapy approaches that for sure will never work and don't work well for
ah.
autistic people, and why?
Yeah. Okay. So, because of the hyperconnected brain, because of the lack of synaptic pruning, we do not habituate. Habituate is where most people weed out their neurons and just kind of deal with a new normal. We don't do that. So, therefore, the entire premise of ABA, applied behavior analysis, is incredibly flawed and will never ever work for us. It just causes trauma because it insists over and over and over again that you should be doing something new, and then because we don't, because we're not wired for that, they take great offense. And it's a very ableist viewpoint that says, ah, yes, there's one correct way to be. It's essentially colonizers. So it will never, ever, ever work. And a close runner-up is cognitive behavior therapy, because cognitive behavior therapy works really well for non-autistic people. It works under the premise that there are lots of thoughts that are maladaptive, and you need to change your thoughts and change what you're doing, and then you will lead a happy, healthy life. But that doesn't take into account when an autistic person says there's too many variables to compute, and they say, well, just stop doing that. You say, why tie my hands behind my back? I can't stop doing that. And they say, oh, you shouldn't be anxious. And we say, but look at all the details. This is happening, and this is happening, and this is happening, and this is happening. And because of pattern recognition, we can say with good certainty that this other thing will happen. And they say, that thing will never happen. And then that thing happens. And that's gaslighting. So the fundamental approaches behind these are incredibly flawed when it comes to us, and we have to actually build new systems around all of these things. Rather than getting used to the feeling of dirt on our feet, we buy slippers. Rather than getting used to how noisy the world is, we buy headphones. Rather than getting used to how bright things are, we buy really nice sunglasses. We have to learn autistic ways of living in a world that is not built for us and that does not understand us. Because
And
the approaches, oh, sorry, go
oh,
on.
go ahead. I was just going to say, and learn how to problem solve
Yes.
as
Yeah,
autistic people. And we need to figure out each autistic person is a little bit different.
yeah,
So,
because the
yeah,
humans and all.
yes. So
Fancy that.
tell us about the autistic centered therapy, which is something
Ah,
you've been leading and working on. So tell us about autistic centered therapy. What is that?
oh yes, I coined that term, and it is basically a different approach to therapy, recognizing and respecting the innate differences in sensory profiles, emotional profiles, and working to build systems that accommodate us rather than try to force us into a box. And I've got a training for autistic-centered therapy at the Chicago School with Kate McNulty. And we spend 9 sessions talking about all the differences in neurology, why we need a different approach, how to take that different approach, all the different ways of addressing our hyper-connected, hyperdense amygdala, the vagus nerve, the fact that we are constantly on all the time, and we need really, really good structures to help us relax. And because again, each of these books on my bookshelves is a single book, and I see it as a single book. But when we have a really nice structure like this nice shelf, it can turn into 2 shelves of cookbooks rather than, oh my God, there's 1,000 books here. What do I do with 1,000 books? And that is very overwhelming. But when we learn systems and structures, we can't tune out that there's 1,000 books, but we are able to say, this structure works. This structure works. And it gives us a foundation on how to apply the endless data barrage so that we can live happy and healthy.
Yes. So thriving as an autistic person and your tour of your all of your collections is showing us how you thrive and that all of these are your special interests. So many parents, professional therapists, they've never heard of special interests and how autistic people are interest-centered human beings. So tell us a little bit about spins or special interests.
Special interests, abbreviated to SP, special IN interest spins, are our lifeblood. They are the things that feed our soul. And every autistic person has special interests, even though so special interests are pathologized by neurotypicals as being quote unquote obsessions rather than something that you are fascinated by that leads you into a monotropic flow state, the flow state pioneered by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. And when we get into this flow state, we get into a meditative state. And when I was building bookshelves and organizing my books and putting my books up, I was in the flow state. And some people might get a flow state from studying crustaceans. Some people might get a flow state from learning about child development. And there's a lot of autistic professionals who got into this field because they wanted to study the humans. And that became a special interest for them. And honestly, academia is massively disproportionately autistic because We are the kind of people that will spend several years and pursue a doctorate and, get into really intense research and learn new things, because that's a lot of work to do for somebody if they're not really internally driven. We have this intrinsic motivation, this data hunger to learn as much as we possibly can and learn everything about a given topic. And ADHD people might learn about many different topics. And again, I am not ruling out the possibility that I am also ADHD, since I have 8 or 9 major spins, and
Yeah.
yeah, all kinds, but they organizing them brings me joy. My son, we've got a shelf full of nothing but command hooks and stickies so that he can take the stickies down, put a new hook up, rearrange his clocks. And Alfred Kinsey, of the famous Kinsey Institute, who studied human sexuality, once said that it is one of the greatest human experiences to have a collection and reorganize your collection and be able to show it off to people. And he didn't know that that's not a neurotypical thing.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
for
yeah.
sure. So we're at the closing of this interview, but I'm gonna have three versions of the same question, basically. Uh, I would like to ask you to what advice do you have for autistic people who are who think that they are autistic, but they haven't been formally diagnosed because getting a proper diagnosis is really difficult. What advice do you have for autistic people early in their journey as an autistic person?
What advice do I have for autistic people early in their journey? So at least, well, with me, I knew I was a weird kid. I knew that I did not relate to other people. I knew that there were I knew that I was different in some way, which, led to the psychology and led to the studying and led to all of the stuff. And if somebody doesn't feel like they fit in with most people and they hear the word autism, an autistic person will tend to research and research and research and research and research autism. Most people don't do that. So if you go down the rabbit hole and read everything that you can about autism and watch all the videos you can about autism, and you're like, but am I really autistic enough? And you begin this 2 year uh, attempt to understand the mysterious world of the autism, chances are you are one of us. Uh, I have met a handful of neurotypical people who say, "Oh yes, someone said I might be autistic, and it could fit." And like, how much research have you done? Not really any. I just, I came to get it checked out. That's not an autistic thing. If somebody says, "Oh yes, here's the first of my many binders," thump. I'm like, ah, today's going to be a good day.
So,
I love it.
yes. So, uh, when you know that you could be autistic, right? So, if you
Hmm.
have an autistic child, there is a
Oh
good
yeah.
chance you're also an autistic parent or
Yeah.
adult. So, that's actually a very good tip. If you think you identify with autistic traits and you've spent hours and hours researching about it, then you're probably correct. So that's a good tip. And what about do you have any advice for parents of newly diagnosed autistic children or maybe an
Well,
autistic teen? So,
advice for parents of newly diagnosed autistic kids. I've recently started doing a buy one get one offer for autism diagnoses, because the child to parent pipeline is huge, because a lot of the times parents will say, "No, my child is completely normal, just like me," and then somebody will say, but there looks like there might be some autism. And then they come in for an evaluation and they'll say, but I do that, but I do that. but I do that. And then you will see them go down this tunnel, and then they'll say, "Oh my God, am I autistic?" And then we'll say, "We can find out." And yeah, because autism is hereditary. Regardless of what quacks say, it is not a random mutation. It doesn't just show up out of nowhere. Some autistic traits might be more visible than others because of the way the brain organizes itself. And for instance, like I am hyperlexic, I use many words. My son is a Gestalt language processor and he needs scripts to function. But it doesn't make either of us any less autistic because he got it from me. And parents will often look back and say that they have to relearn everything because they were raised by at least one autistic parent who was raised by at least one autistic parent. And somewhere along the line, they learned, oh, you can't fidget. You have to sit there and make the eye contact all the time forever. And I learned how to make the eye contact, and my child doesn't. And then we have to say, why is that a thing? Why do you have to do that? And then we have to learn how the parent can undo the ableism and how the parent can live a happy autistic life to be a good role model for the kid. And that way, there's a theory that there are no untraumatized autistic adults out there because of the world that we live in. And it's our responsibility to teach autistic adults how to live a healthier life so that they can raise their kids in happier, healthier environments. And hopefully one day we won't all be traumatized.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're saying to parents, the A word is not a bad word. Don't fight it. Learn how to go with the flow,
Oh, yes.
and you're more alike than different.
We need to learn and that's the big thing because of years and years of neurotypical isolation. We are taught that the A word is somehow bad, that autism is a death sentence thanks to organizations like Autism Speaks, when it's actually just a type of culture. And it's fascinating because one of the things that we talk about a lot is that there are autistic people in every culture on Earth. There are autistic people on every continent, including Antarctica, because nobody else in their right mind would sign up for a months long research expedition in the cold. That's the kind of thing that we jam to. And it's fascinating to see how autism is universal across the world, but viewed differently through different cultural lenses. So some traits are more focused on than others in different places. And but we all have the same autistic accent. We all have special interests. We all have the bottom up processing. And it's a fantastic thing that unites us across the world. And I love it. It's studying autistic culture is just mind blowing. It's one of my special interests.
There you go. Me, mine too. Mine too. So this is really the last question. So what advice do you have for aspiring therapists trying to survive and graduate, and when every day all they hear is all things related to ableism and how you need to put autistic people in categories, or just
Yeah.
put people in categories, specific categories.
Oh, advice for autistic professionals and people entering the field. As someone who stayed closeted for many, many years because of exactly that, all of the discrimination and the ableism, it's really, really tough. And this is why it's important to find a network because we absolutely need to find each other and we absolutely need to support each other because that's the only way that we're going to survive and not burn out. I am the last remaining autistic person in Kentucky who does autism evaluations because everybody else burned out. And I'm very fortunate in that I have a network of people like you, my co-host Aaron Finley for the Autistic Voice Project, and Kate McNulty at the Chicago School, in that I've got a fantastic support system that helps me keep going even when times are difficult. And I'm able to be myself. And I'm fortunate enough to have a voice like right now, being able to tell my story to those nice people who are watching me right now. And uh, it's a thing that we absolutely need to counteract all of the weird ableism and assumptions. And when I first came out, my supervisor assumed that I didn't have empathy, that I was a sociopath. And she once tried to explain empathy to me and once tried to explain theory of mind to me. And I said, well, it seems like from my perspective that your perspective is that my perspective is somehow flawed. Is that correct? And it's like, I could do that too because I am a professional and I got as much training as you. And the world is very weird and biased, and we need each other to have community and to be grounded and to rejoice in autistic culture rather than suppress it.
Right. So, the most important advice we can give to future therapists is stay true to you yourself as an autistic person and find your community of
Yeah,
other autistic therapists, right?
because I recognize that the world is a dangerous place, especially for people of color who are autistic. And I very much recognize there are lots and lots of hurdles, and there are lots of places where it's not safe to come out. I've experienced them myself. But you absolutely need to find spaces where you can unmask, where you can drop the neurotypical image, where you can be yourself openly and freely. And that's where you're going to find the greatest benefits, the greatest rewards, the greatest source of people who absolutely need you. Because survival is one thing, thriving is another. So
That's right.
hopefully stuff like this can help people find each other and live happy, healthy lives.
Thank you so much, Matt. That was my last question. So thank you for doing this. And I think this is very helpful for autistic people trying to follow our footprints so that they can serve other autistic people. And do a really, really incredible job being a safe person in the same room and really preparing autistic kids to grow up to be amazing autistic adults. So, this is gold what you shared with us today. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.